पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज खुले, कुछ हमने खुद खोले और काफी सारे हमारे खिलाफ खोले गए। आज के महाज बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मैं हूं वजाहत सईद खान। 16 जून की सुबह है इधर अमेरिका में, 16 जून की सपहर है बरतानिया और यूरोप में, रात है पाकिस्तान, हिंदुस्तान, ईरान और इजराइल में। चौथा दिन आज हो गया है इजराइल की इस अनडिक्लेयर्ड जंग को, जो अब एस्केलेट कर गई है। आज का महाज जो है वो जंग के नाम नहीं बल्कि एस्केलेशन के नाम है। अभी तक ये फॉर्मली जंग नहीं है, जंग के कुछ तकाजे होते हैं। एक तो जंग डिक्लेयर होती है, जो ये डिक्लेयर्ड अभी तक नहीं है। आप ऐलान करते हैं, कहते हैं कि मैं तुम्हारे पीछे आ रहा हूं, इसका नोटिफिकेशन देते हैं। रेडियो पे अनाउंस होता था एक जमाने में कि जंग शुरू हो गई है। ऑफिशियल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ वॉर होती है। कुछ कवानीन होते हैं, मगर जो महज़ब ममालिक हैं वो ही उन कवानीन को फॉलो करते हैं। इजराइल महज़ब मुल्क कहीं से नहीं है, बल्कि ये भी आर्ग्यूमेंट है कि इजराइल मुल्क ही नहीं है, ऑक्यूपाइंग पावर है। शायद इसलिए दुनिया के दीगर ममालिक जिनमें पाकिस्तान है अभी तक अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह उसको नहीं मानते, उसको नहीं पहचानते। मगर इधर मगरिब में इजराइल की जो जारियत है उसको टॉलरेट किया जाता है। इसके दीगर जो है एस्पेक्ट्स, दीगर इसके डायनामिक्स, दीगर इसके पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक, लॉजिस्टिकल, हिस्टोरिकल जो रीजंस हैं वो तो एक पूरी डॉक्यूमेंट्री बन जाएंगे, उस पर हम बात नहीं कर सकते आज। मगर मोटा मोटा आपको पहले हेडलाइंस देते हैं कि आज हम कर क्या रहे हैं। आज हम इस चौथे दिन का जायजा लेंगे जो ये एस्केलेशन चल रही है। कल सदर ट्रंप ने फरमाया था अपनी अपील में, जो उन्होंने कहा था कि मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूं वही हो जो पाकिस्तान और हिंदुस्तान के दरमियान हुआ है, वही इजराइल और ईरान के साथ हो। ये बड़ी जबरदस्त किस्म की जो हाइफनेशन और इक्विवेलेंस है कि पाकिस्तान और हिंदुस्तान का जो सीज फायर सदर ट्रंप ने करवाया है, वो सीज फायर जो अभी तक हिंदुस्तानी नहीं मानते, कहते हैं वो सीज फायर उन्होंने खुद करवाया है। ये बड़ी इक्विवेलेंस है और गलती भी है। इक्विवेलेंस इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, पाकिस्तान के लिए एडवांटेज है कि पाकिस्तान और हिंदुस्तान को फिर से खबर में सदर ट्रंप साहब ले आए हैं। मगर डिसएडवांटेज भी है, क्योंकि इससे बहुत सारे लोग शायद समझें, और इसमें हमारे हिंदुस्तानी दोस्त हैं जो समझने लग गए हैं कि वो इजराइल है और हम ईरान है। ना हिंदुस्तान इजराइल है और ना पाकिस्तान ईरान है। और शुक्र है कि जैसा भी हमारा मुल्क है, जैसा भी टूटा भज्जा गरीब, इमदाद पे कंडीशनल और डिपेंडेंट, एक इंसर्जेंसी बलूचिस्तान में, दूसरी केपी में, महाजरों का अलग मसला, साउथ पंजाबियों के अलग चक्कर, फौजियों की इस्टेब्लिशमेंट की जो हवस है वो खत्म नहीं होती। इमरान खान और पीटीआई के साथ अलग जुल्म, औरतों के साथ और माइनॉरिटीज के साथ अलग चक्कर। मगर जो भी है, जैसा भी है, पाकिस्तान ईरान नहीं है, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान के पास वो चीज है जो ईरान सिर्फ सोच ही सकता है, और वो उसकी एटमी कुव्वत है। आज वाकई वो पिछले महीने की मुझे याद आ रही है, जब हिंदुस्तान के प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने कहा था कि मैं न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल टॉलरेट नहीं करूंगा। ये न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल नहीं है, इसे न्यूक्लियर डिटरेंस कहते हैं। अगर आज ईरान के पास ये हथियार होते तो दुनिया बहुत अलग होती, और ईरान के साथ वो नहीं हो रहा होता जो ये हो रहा है। मगर ईरान रुक नहीं रहा। ये जो इमेजेस हैं टेल अवीव की चल रही हैं, हाइफा की चल रही हैं, जिधर ईरान ने काउंटर अटैक्स किए हैं और अपने बहुत सारे ऐसे अब मिसाइल्स यूज किए हैं जो उसने पहले नहीं किए। मीनवाइल इजराइल نے ایرانی انرجی اور ایرانی جو سپلائی چینز گیس وغیرہ کی ہے ان کو ٹارگٹ کیا ہے. اور تھوڑی دیر پہلے ویری امپورٹنٹلی یہ اسرائیل نے کلیم کیا ہے کہ تہران کے اوپر جو سکائز ہیں, تہران کا ایئر اسپیس ہے, وہ اسرائیل ٹیک اوور کر گئی ہے. مطلب کہ ایران کا جو کیپٹل ہے اس کے اوپر جو جہاز منڈلا رہے ہیں وہ ایٹ ول منڈلا رہے ہیں. یہ بقول ننٹن یاہو صاحب کے جو پرائم منسٹر ہیں اسرائیل کے, یہ ایک گیم چینجر مومنٹ ہے. اور اب وہ کہہ رہے ہیں اب ہم شروع ہو گئے ہیں, گامزن ہیں ہم ایران کا نیوکلیئر پروگرام اور بیلسٹک مسل کیپیبلٹیز ایران کی ختم کرنے کی. یہ بہت کرٹیکل اپڈیٹ اس لیے ہے کیونکہ اس سب میں جو ایران کے ارد گرد اور جو اسٹریٹس آف ہرمز ہیں اس کے ارد گرد اسرائیلیوں نے جیمنگ بھی شروع کر دی ہے. بہت سارے ان کے جو جی پی ایس سگنلز ہیں وہ اس وقت نیویگیبل نہیں ہیں. نیویگیشن تقریباً ختم ہو گئی ہے ایک امپورٹنٹ دنیا کے امپورٹنٹ خطے میں جس میں اسرائیلی انٹرفیرنس ایکسپیکٹڈ ہے. اس سے گلوبل شپنگ اور ڈیفینیٹلی ایرانین شپنگ ٹریفک وغیرہ جو ہے وہ افیکٹ ہوگا. ایک اور امپورٹنٹ خبر ہے جو ایران کے اندر سے آ رہی ہے کہ انہوں نے ایران کی حکومت نے اندرونی طور پہ بہت اریسٹ کرنا شروع کر دیے ہیں کیونکہ بہت مخبر ہیں, بہت جاسوس ہیں ایران کے اندر جنہوں نے اسرائیل کی مدد کی ہے اور ان اسرائیلیوں کو ان نشانوں تک پہنچایا ہے جس میں ایران کے ٹاپ جو آفیشلز ہیں وہ ٹارگٹ ہوئے ہیں. یہ لیٹسٹ جو ہے خبر ہے کہ ایران کی جو قدس فورس ہے اس کو بھی اب یہ اسرائیلی ٹارگٹ کر رہے ہیں. قدس فورس ان کی آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں ایس ایس جی بھی ہے, مطلب ان کی اسپیشل فورسز گوریلا بھی ہے ان کی خاص, اور آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ ان کے یہ سب سے امپورٹنٹ نظریاتی طور پہ جو ہے پاسبان بھی ہیں. قدس فورس ایک ایلیٹ یونٹ ہے آئی آر جی سی میں, ایرانین ریولوشنری گارڈ کور میں, جو واحد یونٹ ہے اس خاص فوج کا جو خامنئی صاحب کو رپورٹ کرتا ہے. اس کے جو کمانڈر ہیں وہ خامنئی صاحب ہیں, اور اس کے جو ملٹری کمانڈر ہیں قاسم سلیمانی, ان کو 5 سال پہلے ڈونلڈ ٹرمپ نے قتل کر دیا تھا ڈرون اٹیک کے ذریعے. اس کے بعد یہ جو صاحب ہیں یہ آئے تھے, ان کا نام اسماعیل غانی ہے, انہوں نے ٹیک اوور کر لیا تھا. مگر جب سے اب تک قدس فورس کا اسرائیل اس لیے نشانہ بنانا چاہ رہا ہے, امریکہ نے بھی ان کو اس لیے نشانہ بنایا بیکاز ایفیکٹولی یہ ان کا ایرانیوں کا یہ انٹرنیشنل آرم ہے. حزب اللہ کی ٹریننگ ہو, حماس کے ساتھ کوارڈینیشن ہو, سیریا کے ساتھ کام کرنا ہو, ایون اگر بین الاقوامی ایکشنز کرنے ہوں. ان پہ یہ بھی الزام لگتا ہے کہ وہ ارجنٹینا کی جو بامنگ ہوئی تھی کچھ عرصے پہلے, ارجنٹینا وہ جنوبی امریکہ میں ادھر ایک یہودی سینگاگ کی جو بامنگ ہوئی تھی وہ بھی اس میں یہ ملوث تھے. تو قدس فورس آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں ایک ایلیٹ قسم کا یونٹ ہے جس کے ہیڈ کوارٹرز کو اب انہوں نے ٹارگٹ کیا ہے. کل ہم نے دیکھا کہ جنرلز کو, انٹیلیجنس چیف کو اسپیسیفکلی ٹارگٹ کیا جا رہا ہے. یہ جنگ شروع ہوئی تھی نیوکلیئر ہتھیاروں کو اور ان کے میزائلوں کو ختم کرنے کے لیے, مگر یہ جنگ چلی گئی ہے ان کے ایرانیوں کے لیڈرشپ کو ختم کرنے کے چکر میں. ایسی بھی خبریں چل رہی ہیں ادھر امریکہ میں. ابھی تھوڑی دیر پہلے این بی سی کا سکوپ آیا ہے کہ ڈونلڈ ٹرمپ کو پیش کیا گیا تھا یہ پلان کچھ عرصے پہلے اسرائیلیوں کی طرف سے کہ ہم خامنئی کو ہی اڑا دیتے ہیں جو ان کے آیت اللہ ہیں, مگر ڈونلڈ ٹرمپ نے کہا تھا نہیں ایسے نہیں ہو سکتا. تو ہر قسم کی خبر چل رہی ہے, مگر ریجیم چینج جس کو عمران خان بھی یوز کرتا ہے اپنے بیچارے اپنے موقف کے لیے, پھر جس کو صدام حسین بھی یوز کرتا تھا کیونکہ اس کی بھی ریجیم چینج ہوئی تھی, پھر جس کو قذافی بھی یوز کرتا تھا کیونکہ اس کی بھی ریجیم چینج ہوئی تھی, جس کو طالبان پرانے والے طالبان بھی یوز کرتے تھے, ریجیم چینج ان کی بھی ہوئی تھی. تو ریجیم چینج مطلب لیڈرشپ کو اڑا دو, وہ لوگ جو ایک پرٹیکولر پالیسی فالو کر رہے ہیں پوری نیچے سے لے کے اوپر تک ان کو اڑا دو. یہ اس وقت ان کا پرسپیکٹو ہے, مگر عام لوگوں کو بھی ٹارگٹ بنایا جا رہا ہے. یہ ایک بہت امپورٹنٹ پروفیسر صاحب ہیں رابرٹ پیپ, ان کا ایک پرسپیکٹو آیا ہے کہ ایران کے سب سے بڑے شہر تہران کو ٹارگٹ کرنا اور اسپیشلی دیگر اور شہروں کو ٹارگٹ کرنا سویلین پاپولیشن کو टारगेट करना, मतलब ठीक है आप फौजियों को मारें, ठीक है आप जासूसों को मारें, ठीक है आप जहाज गिराएं, ठीक है आप, और क्यों वो भी उस तरफ, दोनों तरफ यही होता है कि आप मिलिट्री टारगेट्स करते हैं, मगर लोगों को क्यों टारगेट किया जा रहा है? थोड़ी देर पहले इजरायलियों ने अनाउंस किया है कि लोगों और लोगों का है, तेहरान के लोगों का है कि निकल जाओ, शहर से चले जाओ, इवैक्यूएट कर दो, और 10 मिनट कह रहे हैं कि हम तुम्हें 10 मिनट देंगे, 10 मिनट में कह रहे हैं कि इवैक्यूएट कर दो। ये एक खौफनाक किस्म का जो पर्सपेक्टिव है कि इतने बड़े शहर को, के वेस्टर्न हिस्से को और सेंट्रल हिस्से को कह रहे हैं कि 10 मिनट में हम बॉम्बिंग शुरू कर रहे हैं, और ये थोड़ी देर पहले ही इन्होंने अनाउंस किया है। ये खौफनाक किस्म की डेवलपमेंट है। लेटेस्ट जो आप देख सकते हैं, ये अल जजीरा का फ्रंट पेज है। लेटेस्ट जो है वो ये है कि एक्सप्लोजन्स फिर से शुरू हो गई हैं, और नई इवैक्यूएशन थ्रेट्स ये कह रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं तेहरान के स्काइज को। ये बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है। तेहरान ने पिछले कुछ सालों में, जैसे और दीगर एयर फोर्सेस ने किया है और दीगर अफवाज ने किया है, तेहरान ने अपने एयर डिफेंसेस डेवलप नहीं किए, जो पिछले अक्टूबर में भी हमने देखा कि धमधमाते हुए इजरायली जहाज आए और तेहरान पे अटैक करके चले गए। तेहरान ने लो टेक जो है ऑफेंसिव्स अपने डेवलप किए हुए हैं, मतलब कि जैसे उनके जो मिसाइल हैं वो ठीक है, उनमें है टेक है, मगर लो टेक ज्यादातर जो उनके प्रॉक्सीज हैं उस पे ईरान ने ज्यादा किया है इन्वेस्ट। हालांकि इजराइल की एयरफोर्स दुनिया में मशहूर है, मशहूर जमाना है, अपनी रीजन की सबसे पावरफुल एयरफोर्स है। सबसे जदीद जहाज जो अमेरिका के पास होते हैं वो इजरायलियों के पास भी हैं, मगर ईरान ने अपने एयर डिफेंसेस कवर नहीं की, और ये शायद आज नजर आ रहा है। रिटेलिएशन चल रही है, चौथा दिन है, और साथ साथ इंपॉर्टेंटली ये भी हो रहा है। गजा को ना भूलें, गजा में आज इन्होंने, इजरायलियों ने 48 लोग शहीद कर दिए हैं आज सुबह से। 33 जो पैलेस्टीनियंस हैं वो वेट कर रहे हैं अस्पतालों में इस वक्त फॉर एड, अकॉर्डिंग टू आई एम सॉरी, 48 लोग शहीद किए, इंक्लूडिंग 33 पैलेस्टीनियंस वेटिंग फॉर एड, जो वेट कर रहे थे इमदाद का, और 60 जो हैं उनको जख्मी किया है। ज्यादातर जो फाइटिंग हो रही है, जो लड़ाई हो रही है, वो शुमाली गजा में हो रही है। और जो वोल्कर टर्क हैं अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा के, उन्होंने कहा है कि मीन्स एंड मेथड्स ऑफ वॉरफेयर इन्फ्लिक्टिंग हॉरिफाइंग अनकॉन्शनेबल सफरिंग ऑन पैलेस्टीनियंस इन गाजा। तो रोज ये उधर भी अटैक कर रहे हैं, औरतों और बच्चों को और शहरों को इधर भी अटैक कर रहे हैं और उधर भी अटैक कर रहे हैं। इधर फर्क ये है कि एक इंपॉर्टेंट जो मैं बता रहा था, पूरा मैंने अपनी थॉट मुकम्मल नहीं की, कि एक प्रोफेसर ट्रेटा पारसी और दीगर और लोगों ने इस पे बात की है, ये उनकी अपडेट है कि ईरान का बड़ा दिल गुर्दा है, ईरान के लोगों का बड़ा दिल गुर्दा है, बड़ा सब्र है, क्योंकि ईरान इराक की जो जंग हुई थी, शहरों की जंग जिसे कहते हैं, वॉर ऑफ सिटीज हुई थी, जब इराक ने बहुत ईरानी सिविलियंस को टारगेट किया था, वो जंग स्टेलमेट हुई थी, इराक नहीं जीत सका था। 1980s की बात है, जब आप में से बहुत सारे मेरे देखने वाले काफी नौजवान हैं, मगर हम में से, हमारी जनरेशन को याद है, वो कम से कम मेरी पहली ईरान की जो जंग थी, पहली मशरिक वस्ता की, मेरी बड़ा जब मैं हो रहा था, ईरान इराक की पहली जंग थी, एंड इट लास्टेड अ व्हाइल, इट वाज अ गुड 7, 8, 9 years दैट इट लास्टेड। तो ये कहा जा रहा है कि काफी इनकी रेजिलियंस है। अच्छा, ये तो हो गया आज का ईरान वर्सेस इजराइल, और इसका जो लुब्बे लुबाब है वो मेरे सबस्टैक पे है, ये मेरा सबस्टैक चैनल है। शेयर करें, लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट करें। इसका लिंक भी मैं अपने लाइव में लगाता हूं, और कभी कभी सुनने की बजाय पढ़ा भी करें। हमारा एक जबरदस्त पीस चल रहा है जो मैं और मेरी टीम ने लिखा है, 9 नॉन डेटा पॉइंट्स अबाउट इजराइल्स वॉर ऑन ईरान। ये तो इधर चल रहा है। अब पाकिस्तान की तरफ चलते हैं। कल किसी ने कहा मजाक में, जब मैंने पाकिस्तान का मेंशन किया इस जंग में, कल किसी ने कहा कि ओ अब्दुल्ला की शादी में क्या बेगानों की शादी में अब्दुल्ला दीवाना, पाकिस्तान का ऐसे कोई काम नहीं है। ये जो जाहिल पर्सपेक्टिव है, आज ये जाहिल पर्सपेक्टिव एक और तरीके से डिस्काउंट किया गया है। एक तो ये जो साहब हैं, ठीक है, जैसे भी हैं, मैं तो उन्हें ज्यादा ना बिलीव करता हूं ना रिस्पेक्ट करता हूं, पाकिस्तान के सबसे बोरिंग तरीन ये फॉरेन मिनिस्टर हैं, मगर इन्होंने एक इंपॉर्टेंट बात की है। इन्होंने एक मैसेज ईरान की तरफ से नेशनल असेंबली में पेश किया है कि इनकी बात हुई है ईरानी फॉरेन मिनिस्टर से, और ये कह रहे हैं कि ईरानी फॉरेन मिनिस्टर ने इन्हें कहा है, और इन्होंने आगे दूसरी और कुव्वतों को बता दिया है, इसहाक डार ने, कि अगर इजराइल अपनी हॉस्टिलिटी सीज करेगा तो ये बात करने के लिए, ईरान बात करने के लिए तैयार है। तो पाकिस्तान इस सब में आ रहा है, कोशिश कर रहा है, और ये इसलिए है कि पाकिस्तान का 1200 किलोमीटर लंबा बॉर्डर लगता है, मजाक नहीं है पाकिस्तान का जो बॉर्डर है। और पाकिस्तान के लिए इम्प्लीकेशन, स्पेशली बलूचिस्तान में पेट्रोल खत्म हो गया है इस वक्त, जो बड़ा ही इंपॉर्टेंट एलिमेंट है, क्योंकि बहुत सारा बलूचिस्तान का, हमारे वेस्टर्न नॉर्थ वेस्ट बलूचिस्तान का और साउथ वेस्ट बलूचिस्तान में ज्यादातर जो पेट्रोल है स्मगल होके ईरान से आता है। तो इसमें पाकिस्तान के लिए भी इम्प्लीकेशंस हैं। एक और इम्प्लीकेशन जो है वो ये है कि हिंदुस्तानी जो हैं उन्होंने दबा के, और मैं कहता हूं दबा के, ये काम शुरू किया हुआ है। कल परसों से ये हम इसको ट्रैक कर रहे हैं कि हिंदुस्तानी गलत खबरें दुनिया में, हिंदुस्तानी ट्रोल फार्म्स जो हैं वो गलत खबरें दुनिया में फैला रहे हैं पाकिस्तान के बारे में। पहले इन्होंने खबर फैलाई परसों कि आसिम मुनीर ने घड़ी दी थी उस जनरल बगैरी को जिसको इजरायलियों ने मार दिया, उस घड़ी में ट्रांसमीटर था। कल इन्होंने ये खबर दी कि पाकिस्तान ने तड़ी लगाई है कि अगर ईरान को कुछ ज्यादा हुआ तो पाकिस्तान इजराइल को न्यूक्लियर अटैक कर देगा। ये जो ट्रोल फार्म्स हैं, डिसइंफॉर्मेशन के फार्म्स हैं, फेक न्यूज के फार्म्स हैं, ये ज्यादातर अल जजीरा के मुताबिक इजराइल के हक में और पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ, मुसलमानों के खिलाफ, फलस्तीनियों के खिलाफ ये जो ट्रोल फार्म्स हैं ये हिंदुस्तान से चलते हैं। तो हिंदुस्तानी पाकिस्तानियों को इस सब में ड्रैग कर रहे हैं, मगर पाकिस्तानी खुद भी ड्रैग हो गए हैं। अब आज की मेन स्टोरी पे चलते हैं। आसिम मुनीर इज इन वॉशिंगटन, और इस स्टोरी के लिए बाय द वे हमारे पास वॉशिंगटन से एक बहुत स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं, 2 मिनट में आने वाले हैं। We're just waiting for him. Michael Kugelman will be joining us in just a minute, real quickly, on this story. But अब तोपों का रुख आसिम मुनीर की तरफ। आसिम मुनीर किधर है? Will the real Asim Munir please stand up? We have no idea. परसों ये आ गए थे, बताया जा रहा था, कहा जा रहा था कि विलर्ड होटल में है, वॉशिंगटन डीसी का मशहूर जमाना, मगर किसी ने अभी तक इनको नहीं देखा। एक रूमर चल रहा है कि ये सेंट कॉम में है, एक और रूमर चल रहा था कि ये परेड पे जाएंगे जो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप की परेड थी। सेंट कॉम की ऑफिशियल सोर्सेज, फ्लोरिडा में जो सेंट्रल कमांड का हेडक्वार्टर्स है, उधर इनकी कोई तस्वीर या कोई अपॉइंटमेंट नहीं शाया हुई। जो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप की ठप परेड थी जिसपे उसे बहुत गालियां पड़ी, इधर इनफैक्ट उसकी परेड पे कोई नहीं आया। ज्यादातर लोगों ने अमेरिका में उसके खिलाफ नो किंग प्रोटेस्ट की, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप की परेड पे भी ये नहीं थे। साथ साथ हिंदुस्तानी मीडिया ने भी दबा के ऐसी स्टोरीज चलाई, मिर्च मसाले लगा के, कि आर्मी चीफ को तो इनवाइट ही नहीं किया गया व्हाइट हाउस के मुताबिक। और ये जो स्टोरी है इसमें अजीब और गरीब किस्म की स्टोरी इंडियंस ने की कि व्हाइट हाउस ने बोला है, व्हाइट हाउस की किसी ऑफिशियल वेबसाइट पे ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है, अननेम्ड सोर्सेज कोट की हैं। मगर हिंदुस्तानी तो बेचारे अपना ही मंजन खा खा के, अपना ही चूरन बेच के खुद ही नशे में हैं। हम चलते हैं अपनी स्टोरी की तरफ। वॉशिंगटन से अनवर इकबाल साहब डॉन के रिपोर्ट करते हैं कि चीफ आ गए हैं, 5 दिन का विजिट है। इन्होंने परेड नहीं अटेंड की, मगर शायद ये सेंटकॉम में है, सेंटकॉम का पता नहीं है, मगर ये जरूर हुआ है, और ये वो हुआ है जो हम कल दिखा रहे थे आपको।
आई एम हियर टुडे टू डेमोन्स्ट्रेट for the visit of Asim Munir, the military field marshal, who is trampling upon democracy in Pakistan. He has changed the constitution, working against public interest. He has sacked the legitimate regime of Pakistan.
Okay, let me finish the sentence. Asim Munir has done a whole lot against Pakistan's democratic dispensation for a whole lot of months. And that is a PTI supporter saying what he's saying. But we've seen this before. We've seen the PTI come out before against Asim Munir. What value has it added? We're not quite sure. But what's interesting is next steps. Why is Asim Munir being Asim Munir at this time, in this space, in this place? What are the implications of Asim Munir's current visit? He finds himself in Washington at an interesting time, when a Pakistani military leader is at he's in the capital of the most erstwhile ally of Israel. This makes up for a great debate, which I'm looking forward to having with my man with a plan, Michael Kugelman, the South Asia columnist for foreign policy. Welcome back to the show, man. How are you? Perfect timing.
Thank you. Great to be here. I wish I had a plan. I feel I'm oftentimes a man without a plan, but I'll take the credit for it. It's good to be back here with you, and indeed, a lot going on for sure. A lot to discuss.
All right, we're going to zoom through this because I've got so many questions, Mike. The last time you were on the show, Operation Sindoor was on its first night. Literally, the Pakistanis had just claimed about shooting down a few planes, and we were having a chat about that. It's been over a month since you were last on the show, but this is an interesting time to have you back. Firstly, is this just bad timing from Asim Munir? The Pakistani leaders tend to have a tendency to like walk into the wrong capitals at the wrong time. Imran Khan in 2022, when Putin was declaring war on the Ukrainians, and now Asim Munir in Washington at this time, where word is that he's not going to get a lot of attention because, people are busy with other things. They've got bigger fish to fry. What do you think of the timing of all of this?
Right. So, I mean, my sense is that this trip, and there's a lot that we really don't know about this trip still, which we can discuss, the fact that there's so much we don't know. But
Yeah.
this trip was, I assume, planned well before there was any indication that there was going to be a new war between Iran and Israel. I would also note, though, that you mentioned the Imran Khan example. Indeed, his presence in Moscow was controversial from a U.S. perspective because Russia was invading Ukraine at that time. But that was a war that did not directly impact Pakistan. I mean, if you look at this war now, it's playing out on Pakistan's doorstep. I mean, we all know that Iran shares a very long border with Pakistan. So indeed, the timing is awkward. And many would push back and say, well, no, Pakistan is going to conduct the diplomacy it needs to conduct. Its leaders will make visits when they feel it serves their interest, and it doesn't matter what else is going on. There's something to be said for that. But absolutely, I mean, it just in the last few minutes, there's been more escalations in this conflict, and Pakistan has not surprisingly at all, expressed robust levels of support for Iran in this war. And it clearly has no love for anything that Israel is doing right now. And yet, the Trump administration, I don't think wanted to see Israel attack Iran, but because the U.S. is Israel's closest ally, the Trump administration, even an unconventional one like this one, is not going to come out and condemn Israel for attacking Iran. And in fact, the pressure will likely build on the U.S. to provide some level of support to Israel. Right. And that could make things even more awkward for the field marshal during his time in Washington.
So what are you hearing about what his agenda is? Who's he meeting? The last time he was here, he met Kurilla the Gorilla. That's the CENTCOM commander, Mike Kurilla. That was down in Florida. They get along. Kurilla was speaking to Congress a few days back and said Pakistan is a phenomenal counterterrorism partner, quote unquote. And we don't know, though, whether they've met so far, but that's expected to be on the agenda, assuming he'll meet Hegseth, assuming he'll meet Rubio, because Rubio is also the NSA and the Secretary of State. There was speculation that he's going to be at that parade and might rub shoulders with Donald Trump. That didn't happen. But what's he going to be talking about if he meets these people? What's he selling here? What does he have to add value to the U.S. system right now?
I mean, I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of ifs in what you said. I don't think we can assume that he'll meet all of those people that you mentioned, mainly because of the war. I mean, clearly, U.S. attention is fully consumed, or the administration's attention on foreign policy is almost fully consumed by that. Keeping in mind as well that President Trump is at least now in Canada. So for those thinking about the possibility of a meeting between the army chief and Trump, not going to happen, though indeed Trump will be back in a few days. And my understanding is that that Munir will be in D.C. for quite a few days. So hypothetically, there'd be a possibility for an encounter later in the week. But, Hegseth, Rubio cannot assume that those meetings will happen. Based on the reporters we've seen, and I think you cited the Dawn story earlier saying that there might be meetings with officials at state and DOD. Possibly, I think that would definitely be likely if there were not this war playing out right now. But clearly it would have to be with a senior official for protocol reasons. But then again, what would fully meet protocol is for Munir to meet with the CENTCOM chief. And I've noted previously that these two men have met 3 times in less than 2 years, twice in Pakistan and once in Tampa, if I recall correctly. As you know, there's deep officer-to-officer ties between Americans and Pakistanis for many years. Yep. I think that's part of this. I don't know. I mean, I would not be surprised if Munir has been in Tampa or is there now or will be going there at some point in the next few days. Just looking at what's most probable, what's most likely, that I could see happening. But in terms of what he does here in Washington, it's unclear. In terms of the message that he would bring, I would think that counterterrorism would be a big focus, just because there does seem to be some momentum there. I mean, Kurilla, he testified on Capitol Hill last week, and his prepared testimony made reference to U.S.-Pakistan cooperation on counterterrorism. And as I recall, he called out not only the publicly known case of the two countries working to apprehend the ISK terrorists involved in the Abbey Gate attack, but he also mentioned several other cases, not with specifics. Yeah. So he suggested that there is some stuff playing out between the two on counterterrorism. So I suspect that'll be a big part of the discussions. But then again, the Field Marshal Munir, he has tremendous levels of power. He has an ever-growing portfolio, and that would suggest that he would be empowered to discuss a number of issues that have nothing to do with hard security, and a number of issues that one wouldn't necessarily expect. And so let's think outside the box. Maybe it's not outside the box these days. Critical minerals, crypto. Yep. Critical minerals and crypto are the two issues that have most gotten Washington's attention vis-a-vis Pakistan, aside from counterterrorism. So those 3 C's. If you want to throw in a 4th C, we can talk about the China factor. But I think that those 2 issues could come up. I think and I'll end here, sorry. At the same time, when that very senior Pakistani delegation was here last week, led by Bilal Bhutto, there was another visiting Pakistani official, the head of Pakistan's crypto council, the young man who leads it. Right. He got a meeting with Trump's guy who heads crypto issues, as head of the digital assets. That's the only case I know of where you have a visiting Pakistani official that meets someone high up at the White House. That says something, I think, right there.
That's interesting. So let's percolate those 4 C's: counterterrorism, crypto, critical minerals, and possibly China. And because the general now controls Pakistan's internal counterterrorism policy, foreign policy, economic policy, and of course, anything to do with China, that all makes sense. But too bad. This is just the wrong time for him to be around. I hope he gets some FaceTime with these people. But what do you make of the whole PTI bit? You saw the song and dance yesterday. The PTI finally got its act together, showed up in healthy numbers outside the Pakistani embassy. They trended on Twitter for a minute. But in a way, as an observer of the diaspora's political action, and I remember you were quite impressed by what the diaspora achieved last summer, Mike, when they got that huge HR Resolution 901 in a pretty clear majority. In fact, they almost swept it. They almost got it a unanimous vote against the regime, the Pakistani regime in Congress. Obviously, it was a non-binding resolution. But I remember you were impressed. On Twitter, you said something like, "Wow, this is a big moment." A year later, almost a year later, what's your assessment on where the Pakistani diaspora stands, besides getting organized against the field marshal outside the embassy? Where do you think they stand today?
I think the friendly relationship that appears to be in place between the U.S. and Pakistan right now, and that includes the fact that Munir is in D.C. or will be here. I think that puts the diaspora on the defensive, because a big part of this effort on the part of the diaspora was to essentially pressure the Trump administration to take more of a look at the at everything that's happening in Pakistan politically, with the threats to democracy and the clampdowns and the Imran Khan situation and all that. And there's been no indication at all from this administration that it really has any interest in focusing on any of those issues. And I had predicted that. A lot of people yelled at me, but I think that's, at least for now, that appears to be the case. Now, in terms of the diaspora, I should say that the turnout at the protest was quite significant, based on the live stream, which I took a look at, as well as some folks that were covering it. We're talking about hundreds of people, which is quite a lot of folks for a diaspora event in the United States, in Washington. I mean, we're not talking about tens of thousands of people. No one expected that, but hundreds of people came, and there were a lot of road restrictions in D.C. that day because of the Trump parade and all of that. The weather was also not very good, but the fact that you had so many people come, I think that's significant. And these were not just locals. I mean, you had people coming from New York, New Jersey, Michigan. There were also, I know, some folks that came from Canada. So this is pretty significant. I think that is sort of a reminder that the sentiment among so much of the Pakistani American diaspora remains quite strong, and that entails being very critical of the current government, the current army chief, and a lot of unhappiness about the plight of Imran Khan. Now, what I'll say here is that the army chief does have an opportunity to try to counter this fresh momentum that the diaspora appears to have gotten. Again, I don't know who he's going to be meeting with, but we know that the diaspora has done a fair amount of advocacy on Capitol Hill. I mean, you mentioned the resolution last year. There's been a lot of noise there. If Munir were able to get some meetings with senior representatives, senators, I think that could be pretty significant. As I recall, you had a congressional delegation in Pakistan a few months ago, and some of these folks met with Munir there. So that suggests there could be opportunities for meetings with congressional leaders. Again, I don't know, but if that happens, I think that could be a bit of a pushback, another pushback against what the pro-Khan diaspora has been up to on the Hill in recent months.
Right. Mike, I'm going to take a quick second. We're going to digress, but you're going to stay with me because this is crazy. We're seeing this escalation, as you said, is ramping up. We're seeing these pictures. This is the Iranian state broadcaster, this anchor, and they've just been attacked while they were going live. Please watch. Bear with me.
صدایی که شنیدید فضای غبارآلود استادیوم.
Yeah, viewer discretion is advised. Just to remind everyone, I am with Mike Kugelman, and we are live on this stream. We're talking about Iran versus Israel, the Pakistani military chief who happens to be in Washington at this time, and of course, how the Pakistani diaspora is angling against him. This is a strange dynamic. But Mike, two things. Let's pivot to India as well right now. The Indians have been, since Sindoor, been trying to do what they need to do, which is not just, they're not relenting. Let's just say that. Operation Sindoor is still online as far as the Indian authorities are concerned. The Indian Prime Minister's warned against that. And the Indian Foreign Ministry has also been active. In the middle, they've talked to the World Bank. They've tried to scuttle Pakistan's loans at the IMF. And then there's been a plenary of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force in Singapore. And this is the headline which is running in Pakistan right now, where the Indians seem to have, failed at getting Pakistan on this list. Now, this is not the first time the Indians have tried to get Pakistan on the FATF. You remember that Pakistan's, much thanks to its own very, very shady record of supporting and housing and even training some of these organizations, protecting them. These prescribed organizations, Pakistan has gone ahead and been, I must say, if I may say so, Pakistan's been deserving of some of this in the past, but the Indians are trying again to get Pakistan on it. They failed. What do you make of this? This is they got Pakistan in the late 2000s. They got Pakistan on the list in the late 2010s. Pakistan's managed through its friends, the Saudis, the Chinese, to get off it. But why did Pakistan? How did Pakistan manage to get ahead this time? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it would be premature to say that that Pakistan is not being added to the gray list. I mean, FATF is a very technical institution. There's a very long process that plays out when there's a desire on the part of a member to list a particular country. So just because nothing happened at this most recent meeting doesn't mean that something won't happen later. But to your question, look, India, as we all know, has not, at least publicly, provided any evidence linking Pakistan to the Pahalgam attack. And this remains the case. I mean, if there's something out there or something that hasn't been put out to the public, maybe that's the case, but I'm aware of no evidence that's been provided. So I think that could be a factor that might shape the thinking and the perceptions of the international community, including potentially members of FATF. I think that's a factor right there. This is clearly, I think a relief for Pakistan. And it's also not new for India to look for ways to try to isolate Pakistan on the global stage. It's clearly ramping that up now, but and that includes trying to get in Pakistan's funders to provide less support to Pakistan. But it's very difficult to do that, quite frankly. I mean, India may be an influential global actor. It is, but Pakistan has a lot to offer as well, quite frankly, and it can depend on a number of very influential friends. I mean, Pakistan doesn't have huge numbers of close friends, but it does have good friends, and those that it has, that many of them are powerful entities, whether you're talking about China, the Saudis, the Gulf states, Turkey, and so on. So that's why I think that it'll be difficult for India to conduct this campaign that it seeks to do to isolate Pakistan globally.
Yeah, so you're right. Pakistan is still under standard monitoring. It is not being grey listed again. That doesn't mean it's off the hook by any means, but it has not been grey listed at this particular point, as long as it's showing continued progress. Japan, Turkey, and China helped block India's bid, according to this story. But Mike, to your point, a month ago, when all of this was happening and we last talked, and the Indians and Pakistanis were going at it at the beginning of Operation Sindoor, the Indians and Pakistanis came out with completely different perspectives and completely different wins. We're not going to debate Sindoor versus Bunyan and Mursus in today's show, but I do want to continue on the point you just made. Pakistan's friends and alliances during and after that conflict versus India's friends and partners during and after that conflict. Pakistan had China to bank on, Turkey to bank on, even Azerbaijan to bank on, and in the end, the U.S. to broker a ceasefire. India is not on all of a sudden on very good terms because of that constant reminder by the Trump administration that it broke it. Like the ceasefire is the best thing since sliced bread, according to Donald Trump. He even touted it yesterday when he was appealing to Iran and Israel that please act like India and Pakistan and help me help you, right? He was having his Jerry Maguire moment and citing India and Pakistan as a great example of his diplomacy. But besides that, the only people who came out to support the Indians, the mighty Indians, the voice of the global South Indians, the informal member of the G7 Indians, were Israel and to some extent the Taliban. I would have expected the opposite. I would have expected, mighty diplomatic, rising, everybody's favorite Bollywood India to sort of have more friends. But yet it was the Pakistanis whose friends delivered and the Indians who were isolated. And we were expecting the opposite. What do you think happened?
Yeah, great point. It was, as I recall, a very interesting trifecta of entities that fully backed India during the conflict. One, as you note, was Israel. Another was the Taliban, oddly, and then the third was Taiwan. That was it. And this is very disappointing to India and Indian officials. I think it's very clear what happened. Initially, after the Pahalgam attack, you had significant levels of expressions of support and sympathy for India because it had just suffered a horrific terrorist attack. I mean, even China, the Chinese ambassador in New Delhi issued a post on X sympathizing with India, expressing its solidarity. But then once the conflict began, and once the conflict escalated, the international community started to visualize worst case scenarios, mushroom clouds, worrying about nuclear escalation risks, because this is a rare case of two countries that have nuclear weapons fighting each other. It doesn't happen very often, if at all. So I think that very quickly attention focused away from the terrorism that provoked the crisis and led to the conflict, and shifted to concerns about escalation risks. And that is why you didn't have many countries at all, urging India on to keep fighting this battle. Now, in New Delhi, the hope was that its friends and its partners and other countries would see everything it's doing as a counterterrorism imperative, and it was definitely hoping that Washington would see it that way. But that's not how it worked out. If there were no nuclear weapons at play here, maybe the response from the international community would have been different if each country didn't have nuclear arms. So that's a significant distinction to make.
Right. Do you think some of this has to do with what is being called the Jaishankar effect, Mike? I know you watch Indian diplomats closer than most people, but while I'm a big fan of the Indian foreign minister, his whole India first bit is being critiqued by watchers of South Bloc, India's MEA, as India first equals to India alone. He's been caught lecturing his European counterparts, his American counterparts about Russia. There's been aspects about, I'm just going to use the A word. Indian arrogance is what a lot of people, a lot of smaller countries, you've seen this on Twitter, you've seen a lot of analysts weigh in that the Indian Foreign Office hasn't been nice, just not nice to a lot of its friends and counterparts, and that may have helped. Of course, there's the whole Russia factor as well, the way they've been playing both sides on the Russian and vis-a-vis Ukraine. What do you think India's diplomats should be doing at this point to get the house in order?
It is an irony, I think. You've laid out some of these perceptions that some of the smaller states have about India, and India, it projects itself as a voice of the global South. So it's it explicitly has a foreign policy that's meant to cultivate better ties with some of the very countries that are expressing unease with India, and certainly that includes some of its neighbors in South Asia. Not talking about Pakistan, but other states in the region. But one could talk about others further afield as well. So it's been tough. And, there was, of course, you had 7 different Indian delegations that literally traveled the world. They visited 33 world capitals, compared to only 2 delegations from Pakistan that visited 5 world capitals. But I would argue that the impacts of that massive global blitz were relatively limited, because it's unclear to me that minds have changed, so to speak, and you're not seeing countries come out and taking a very different position toward India. Now, I think the position remains the same, that much of the world supports India and sympathizes with it in the face of the terrorist attack that it faced, but it still would like to see better relations between India and Pakistan. It doesn't want to see crises and conflicts because it would worry about the stability implications and the nuclear escalation risks. I would say that one thing that India did do well, I saw this from the delegation that was in the US.
Yeah.
They were in New York, as you know, and they were here in DC too. Towards the end of the visit, they started linking India's fight to the world's fight, and this is very important. Some members of the delegation indicated that it's not just us that faces this problem of terrorism; it's the world on the whole. And I think there it's useful to offer that reminder, which a number of Americans may have forgotten, that the Mumbai terrorist attacks carried out by Lashkar-e-Taiba, one of the groups that worries India the most. Those attacks killed dozens of people, but several Americans were killed in those attacks as well. And so for India to essentially argue that the terrorism, Islamist terrorism, in some cases Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, has been responsible for the deaths of people that are not only Indian nationals, I think that was something that might have sort of gotten some attention from the Indian side, which might not have registered earlier on. So I think that's important. But at the end of the day, I think New Delhi will need to conclude that there's only so much it can do to change minds. It'll need to accept the fact that countries and publics have their views and their interests, and there's going to be certain very strong, enduring views, and certainly that relates to the issue of concerns about nuclear escalation risks.
Mike, it's so fun to talk to you, man. We need to have you back on the show. Your narrative arc is fantastic. Love the way you explain everything. Thanks for being on the show again. What are you writing about this week in your column on foreign policy?
Well, the editor's supposed to sign off, but I'll say that I'm hoping to look at how this Israel-Iran war could impact the region, particularly India and Pakistan. You showed those very disturbing clips. It's just a really, really dangerous state of affairs. And as I said, Pakistan's right on the doorstep of this, but the region on the whole is impacted in different ways. So I'll probably look at that.
And real quickly, give us a little preview. How will it impact India and Pakistan? Because yesterday, when I talked about this, there were people screaming in the comment section saying, "Oh, why are you dragging Pakistan and India into this? This is not our war. Nothing's going to happen." Despite of the fact that there's a huge porous border on the Pakistani side, half of Balochistan doesn't have that infamously smuggled Iranian petrol and even an electricity grid which is connected to Iran. So there's problems on the border. But how do you think it'll play out in the rest of the region?
Well, look at India. India's going to have an especially difficult balancing act to carry out here. Its relationship with Israel has grown in a huge way in recent years. Israel's become a top arms supplier, and Israel, as we noted, was one of the very small number of entities that backed India throughout its conflict. India appreciates that, but at the same time, India continues to have a lot of equities in the Middle East with its many partners there, as well as with Iran. India is trying to help work with Iran to develop the Chabahar port project. A lot of sanctions risks from the U.S., but it's still trying to work on that. So, India successfully balanced U.S. and Russia, its relations with the U.S. and Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. But I think this could be an even more difficult balancing act for India, especially because I think so much of the world thinks that India has essentially taken Israel's side, which it is not formally, but it definitely has sympathy for Israel and what it's doing right now. But it's going to need to balance that all. Not going to be easy.
Mike Kugelman, my man with the plan in DC. I will talk to you soon, hopefully after your next piece comes out, Mike. And let's not take another month to have you back on the show. Let's do this more regularly.
That would be great. Always a pleasure to join you. Thank you.
Take care. That was Mike Kugelman, South Asia columnist from Washington, D.C. Last bits, very importantly, जो हो रहा है वो आपके सामने है. This is critical for you to understand. ये इस वक्त जो perspective है हमारी तरफ से आपके लिए ये दिखाना आपको जरूरी है, because this is the latest from Israel and Iran. ये जो information आपके सामने इस वक्त नजर आ रही है आपको, ये latest visuals हैं. चौथा दिन है इस खौफनाक जंग का. Share, like, subscribe, comment, support independent journalism, support a different perspective, support your own education. मैं हूं वजाहत सईद खान. मेंबरशिप ऑप्शंस लिंक में है, सबस्टैक लिंक में है, व्हाट्सएप लिंक में है, हर चीज लिंक में है, डिस्क्रिप्शन में है. फॉलो करें, सपोर्ट करें. 5 लाख सब्सक्राइबर्स के करीब हम माशाल्लाह से जा रहे हैं. 1000 सब्सक्राइबर्स रह गए हैं. शेयर करें अपनी फैमिली फ्रेंड्स के साथ اور دعا کریں خطے کے لیے, ہمارے مسلمان بھائیوں کے لیے, خطے میں امن کے لیے, اور یہ اسپیسیفکلی دعا کریں کہ یہ جو جنگ ہے یہ پھیلے نہ اور پاکستان ہندوستان تک نہ آئے. I bid you a good night. Take it easy. Talk to you very soon. پاکستان زندہ.
پاکستان کے خلاف بہت سارے محاذ کھلے, کچھ ہم نے خود کھولے اور کافی سارے ہمارے خلاف کھولے گئے. آج کا محاذ